Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our session. It wasn't widely marketed, so happy to see some faces in the audience today. My name's Ashley Ching, and I'm the founder and CEO of InHaven. At InHaven, we help professional property managers really set their standards for around the comfort of the stay, the sleep, bathing, and eating experiences, and then we help them replenish on those and promote those standards to their guests. And I'm joined here with Steve Schwab.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Schwab. I'm the founder of Casago. Started the company when I was 28 years old. I had been working at it as my only adult job since then. Started in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, grew it from there. Recently, we did a merger with Vacasa. You may have heard about it. As we've done that, we are currently taking the entire model and turning it into a franchise model, in which we are selling off every single market to locally owned and operated operators, believing that's the correct model for this. We'll be discussing that in a little bit. Our plans are to finish up this within the next 16 months, and then to look to the next steps of how we build the brand going forward.
So, late last year, obviously, Vacasa announced its distressed sale to the Casago consortium. And 3 weeks later, unbelievably, the largest property manager in the hotel space, Aimbridge Hospitality, announced its out-of-court bankruptcy restructuring. And so these near concurrent events led InHaven to do a bunch of research, to go out and ask the question, why the two largest management companies were failing on both the hotel and the vacation rental side. And we wanted to really get beyond the media narrative. The media narrative told us that, it's because of the executive teams. Well, 15 different executive teams had tried to solve for making national hospitality management successful, and it didn't work out. Other people blamed private equity, but we've seen that national public companies haven't worked in the public space either, so it can't just be private equity. People blamed exogenous events like 9/11, the financial crisis, but many management companies have survived through this. And so we set out to interview hundreds of executives across the restaurant, hotel, and vacation rental space in property management. We talked to people that were both local operators and national operators to understand what makes for successful hospitality management and where do the failures occur. And we really tried to peel back the onion to understand, it goes well beyond what the media narrative had put out there. It really became a structural issue for these companies. And so what we uncovered were really these 5 key pillars to successful hospitality management. And so Steve and I want to talk about that today. And I should note that one of our advisors at InHaven is another Steve Joyce, who's the chairman of Aimbridge Hospitality, and we've taken him through our case study as well. And a lot of the things that we uncovered through these interviews, he's very much doing today and implementing to turn around the Aimbridge Hospitality business as well. So the first key pillar that we...
Before we jump to the first pillar, I'd just like to mention that I think what's important to understand is that as we went through this and Ashley shared the report with me, it confirmed what I believed a lot about the industry and what was going on. Was it specific events like 9/11, COVID? No, it wasn't these sort of things. Was it necessarily the talent of the exec teams or the CEOs? No, it wasn't that either. It really comes down to structure and design that has a lot to do with the reason why we've seen these multiple failures happen within hospitality at certain size and points. So I think that was a great part of that's why I was interested in having a discussion about this report after reading through it, and where really the thesis of it all comes from. And like Ashley said, there was 5 different pillars. Yep. First one is the curated portfolio, and
so this one, so curated portfolio, it's really important. We heard this over and over again from the executives that we spoke to. Making sure that each property could be profitable on its own. We heard things like 4 out of 5 properties have to be drive-by and wave properties. Essentially, they're sort of taking care of themselves, and you're just dealing with one issue property of the 5. A lot of people spoke about you really need to weed out those bad properties, and bad properties have different attributes, like what makes them bad. It could be that they're unprofitable. It could be that they require a lot of maintenance, or they've got difficult owners. But really looking at your portfolio and making sure it's curated. And I liken back to, or we talked to some of the executives at Panda Express. So Panda Express, when they bring on a new location, all the executives will go out and visit that mall. They'll do a pro forma analysis to make sure that that location can be profitable on its own. And they will say, we'll pay a premium for this specific location in this food court. But if they don't get that location, they walk. And so they're very, very serious when it comes to making sure that they bring on profitable locations. And so we saw through our study on Vacasa and Ambridge, a lot of their acquisitions came through M&A. And with M&A, you can bring on a lot of bad portfolio. And so that's where we saw things start to crumble. Steve, how are you curating your portfolio today?
I think a big part of what we've seen in the larger markets that have started to struggle or fail or churn out was there was a mindset that any unit was a good unit. And if you really go back to the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, even post COVID, any unit would rent. And so it was really thought about any unit is a good property to have because it was driving profitability. But obviously today's market, the cost to rent, there's a floor that you have to have in order to be able to even just be profitable. Along with that, we see that demand hasn't necessarily shrank, but supply has outpaced it. So when you think about anything that's below the top 50th percentile, or yesterday we were having a discussion about what was even below the top 10 percentile of what inventory looks like, the demand on those properties is very, very different. So being able to build out a portfolio that's curated that fits not only something that's profitable, but also what fits your brand, so that you have reputational integrity is important, especially in the age where we're seeing the OTAs come along, with the ratings being one of the main drivers of how you're now ranked in the OTAs. So by providing an uncurated or just a sloppy portfolio, those units who are dragging themselves down, they're not just dragging themselves down in the search rankings, they're dragging down your entire portfolio and your accounts rankings all together, right? So more than ever, a curated portfolio is key to being successful when you're building out a property management company that's going to be able to rent the units that deserve to be rented, deserve to be found in search, deserve to be found in rank. That's what we're doing a lot of now when you talk to our franchise owners who are buying these portfolios. While they're taking on entire geographic locations, they're looking at it property by property and deciding which properties stay and which properties go. And I think that's going to be important to the future of at least how CasaGo moves forward and how we rebuild that brand and make sure that the portfolios that we offer have integrity of brand and are able to compete in the search engines and the OTA search engine algorithms. Because as we know, individual homeowners renting properties are ranking better when you do the searches in the queries. We're going to have to figure out how to compete with that by making sure that our brand, our franchisees and local operations are providing product and inventory that competes with them in the rankings. Otherwise, they're going to underperform.
Yeah. Yep. So the next, key pillar that we talked about, or that we uncovered, was around making sure that you are curating your portfolio around similar demand drivers, so guest demand drivers. So for example, we've seen successful vacation rental property managers like a Movie Mountains or a Beau Luxury Rentals that have gone into multiple ski markets, so different markets, but they're attracting the same consumer, right? These are wealthy individuals. They want locations near the ski mountain, and so they can market and attract them and service them in the same way, but in their different towns. And so really making sure that you're taking on properties that have similar demand drivers. So where we've seen people get in trouble is if they take on, more like economy level, small condos to mansions in one market, right? There's different demand drivers, different ways that you have to be marketing to your guests. Or if you expand to, you're in the beach and now you're doing mountain, right? There's just totally different demand drivers. The guest expectations are completely different. And so that's what we heard over and over again was, you really need to curate around these similar demand drivers. How do you look at this from a CasaGo perspective?
when you look at the entire country as a whole and the inventory that you're trying to market, the way and the time and even the expense in which you go after specific markets is very different than you go after an entire portfolio. To be able to build a brand or to be able to build marketing around the similar demand drivers takes breaking it back down to the local level. And there again, once you get past not just what you're looking at from which market's at, is this a hotel, is this a mountain, is this ski, is this is this beach, is this desert, is this urban? Those seem like the obvious ones, but when you think about similar demand drivers, who's coming and why, and what's their affordability, it becomes much more difficult to market low-end properties alongside of high-end properties, right? So we can go out and figure out how to segment and break up, beach versus mountain. That's not the hard part. The failures that were happening, when you look across the report that Ashley built out, was when you try to take low-end properties and put them next to high-end properties and put them within the same demand drivers, you end up with very different client base, reasons why people are coming, but also very different service levels of which you can or can't afford. So if you're trying to take your profitability within an organization and service low-end properties, thinking that you're also going to be able to provide that same service level to high-end properties and have satisfaction, it's just not going to happen, right? You're going to fail. And I think that's where you see a lot of failures happening, and that's why often you see hotels segment their brands out, throughout their different portfolios of what is their low-end brand, what is their high-end brand. And within vacation rentals, nobody's really hit the scale in which they can build any one real brand that's forward-facing, let alone try to build multiple brands that are forward-facing, commercial-facing, right? So getting to one brand where you can say, okay, this is what we stand for, this is who we are, that's pretty darn hard in today's market, let alone trying to build 4 different brands for 4 different levels of service. And I think that's where the fails we've seen happen in the past. It's one of the reasons why when you look at something like a Remax or in the real estate world, why the franchise model seems to work, because we've seen Remax offices who are local and they build their reputation locally with the people there, as maybe they're the agent for luxury brands inside of Vail or inside of Scottsdale, whatever that might look like, as opposed to another real estate agent at a completely different market who's found their own niche. That's why I tend to believe that breaking it down, Vacasa down into bite-sized elements, and then being able to allow the franchises take their own personality and bring it onto the portfolio that they're looking to build is a better system for what we're doing. So,
I have one thing to add on the service levels. What do you guys think is the #1 difference between an economy hotel and a luxury hotel? Any thoughts?
Just the name.
Service. So it's the number of people in the lobby. So when you check into a Motel 6, there is one person behind the front desk to check you in. When you check into a Four Seasons, there are probably 8 to 11 people in the lobby. There is someone to open the door for you. There's someone to take your luggage. There's even someone to push the elevator button to you, right? A Motel 6 can't put in Frette or Sephora sheets and call it a luxury hotel. It really is primarily service. And so, in thinking about the demand drivers, as Steve was just mentioning, if you're trying to service economy level stays versus luxury, I mean, you have to, on the luxury end, we look at staff to property ratios, and you're looking at 1 to 4, 1 to 3 in some cases, because it just is such a high touch service that guest is expecting, versus in an economy where you could be 1 to every 15 properties or so. So, yeah.
It's not the sheets and towels, huh?
Not the sheets and towels. Yep.
All right. Interesting.
Service is the biggest differentiator. Mm-hmm.
So, well, that actually kind of brings us to number 3 about those ratios. The third pillar was the limited number of owners. And I'm a big believer in this, but tell us what the report says and how it fits into that narrative.
Yeah. This was actually the most interesting finding I found in the report, one of them. And I don't think a lot of people talk about it, is the number of owners can be the limiting factor for your ability to scale. We talked to a group called, I don't know if you guys have dined at a Pappas family restaurant, Pappasitas, Pappados, and they're based in Texas, but they've got restaurants in Texas and all over the Midwest. And they own and manage all their restaurants. And so an example was they got wind that there were some standard challenges with their restrooms in the Dallas market. And so the executive team traveled to Dallas, visited their 15 locations there, and confirmed, yes, they are subpar. And that following Monday, they made the decision to replace all of their general managers with their assistant general managers, sending a message to the entire organization that, if these standards aren't upheld, we will make changes. And they were able to do this very quickly and address these quality concerns because they owned and managed all of these restaurants. And so when you start bringing on so many different owners, it makes it much harder to make strategic changes for your businesses and to get them all aligned. And they have so many different needs. So we talked to so many executives that talked about, we're traveling across the country trying to appease all these owners, and it was very distracting to, our business strategy and our overall organization. And so, the discussion continued to come around to, you have to be very careful with the owners that you're bringing on and limiting those numbers. How are you approaching this today, Steve?
Yeah, I always talk about that there's a couple decisions in life that will make your life either better or worse, and it's the spouse you pick, the pet that you pick,
true,
and the homeowners you bring into your portfolio. It will change your life. So all three of them will have either uplifting or devastating effects within your life. When you think about bringing, where we were with Vacasa, the just sheer number of homeowners to be able to service on an individual basis is the pain point that becomes near impossible to be able to control. And just to have messaging from a centralized corporate level about the needs, wants, desires, struggles, in-market issues that are going on, local conversations, and even just being able to control the quality of general managers at so many different locations destroys the P&L in a lot of ways, because the amount of levels you have, the levels of management and mid-management that you have to have really creates a diseconomies of scale. And we're going to talk about a little bit diseconomies of scale later. But there is a point, it is a numbers game in vacation rentals. Everybody knows that. You can't just make a living with one homeowner and one property, right? Unless it's some sort of great property and you have a very low overhead. But that doesn't work. So there is a numbers game. There is a place, sweet spot where you have built a curated number of homeowners with properties that fit your product and providing value and profitability. And you're still able to have a relationship that transcends the business with your homeowners that allows them to not only meet their economic demands, but meet their emotional demands that they've just handed over one of the most valuable assets to you. Sometimes it can be a motivation that is something that they're emotionally attached to, and they're unlocking the unused value of their asset while they're away. Maybe they're not using it so much. Some of it might be the emotions of an investment, a large investment in which they watched too many TikTok videos during COVID and went out and bought a property, and now they're living too close to the belly, and they're deeply concerned about that. Or there just may be, the needs of making sure that they're good stewards of the entire community in which that they're a part of, and they want to make sure that people that are coming there are not only treating their own property with respect, but also the community with respect. And how are they fitting into that, right? And then you also have the bad actors in which you're trying to figure out how to deal with it as well. Once you get past your ability to maintain and curate your homeowners at a level in which you understand their individual needs, the entire ecosystem becomes unwieldy. Each and every individual homeowner doesn't care how many properties you have, beyond the fact that they want to make sure you have enough resources to be stable and provide the type of marketing and services that they need. They want to see that you have at least that type of scale. Anything past that has a zero value to that homeowner's wants and needs. In fact, it's actually a detractor to them within their mindset, right? Okay, you have enough of an inventory that you're stable, you're going to be there, you're not going to raid my trust account in the middle of the night and put us both in trouble. You have enough resources to have a marketing person that can come in and make sure that I'm ranking well in the OTAs, that you're out marketing my property, you're doing a good job. You have enough resources that you have somebody, you can afford somebody to come out and inspect the property, that you have the technology to help us manage it. Once you get past that level, every unit added onto that in their mind is a detractor. And at some point it physically becomes a detractor, because your ability to treat them as a one-on-one individual goes down dramatically, and your ability to contact them, reach out to them, and have real conversations with them and provide the stability that you need for that relationship diminishes. So, there again, how we're trying to solve for it is break this down into chunk size, into bite-sized elements in which people who have a vested interest in making sure that the decisions are being made closer to that front door for the homeowner's best interest is being met, so that that one-on-one relationship ends up growing, because that's what happens with churn, right? You earning the right to fail with that homeowner through goodwill, through history, through trust. The pillars of trust is the number one way that you can drive down churn within your portfolio. There's other factors too. You're always going to have some churn, but one of the biggest fail points of Vacasa was this churn. When you have churn rates that are unsustainable, and you have to pay to replenish that inventory, it destroys your economic viability. And so limiting the number of homeowners, making sure the homeowners are the right homeowners, and then treating them with respect and dignity and building relationships with them is diminished once you reach, once you get past your own ability to do that. Which leads us really into the next pillar, which is, and the last pillar, no, next to last pillar, is locally oriented operations, not centralized, which they found was one of the main reasons and keys of why there was failures happening throughout all these different organizations.
Yeah. I mean, we just heard over and over again, you need to keep decision-making closest to the properties. And when you try to overly centralize, and you try to centralize functions like finance and guest services, where a guest is frustrated, they're in, call it Gatlinburg, Tennessee, but they're calling an office in Portland, and they're talking to someone that's not there locally, doesn't understand where they are. It can be super frustrating, and it can lead to a lot of churn on both the owner and the guest side. And Steve, you're doing so much to really take back the business and around local wins. Can you talk about what you're doing at Vacasa and CasaGo?
I think that when you think about these local oriented operations, there's a gentleman in the room named Tim Smith. We call him Smitty. He just closed on his inventory from Vacasa yesterday, where he went from, a year ago, I think he was at about 60 to 80 properties. Now he's sitting around 250 properties. Churn has been reduced as we've started to take over Vacasa, just trying to have good conversations with homeowners, being owner-centric. But my true belief, and mark my words, that at next DARM, asking him what his churn rates are, as opposed to what they are today, what they've been historically within his markets that he's taken on, is going to be dramatically reduced, because Tim Smith isn't leaving New Smyrna. Tim Smith has an obligation to his teammates. Tim Smith has local operations in which he understands why you turn the lights off in New Smyrna, because there's a bunch of turtles that you don't want to disrupt at night. He understands, and I'm being tongue-in-cheek about it, but if you don't understand the local operations, you don't have somebody who has a vested interest in making sure it's successful and stabilization of that market, where you're not replacing general managers on an ongoing basis, which you can't build relationships within the organization with your homeowner, which are your product owners, you're going to fail. And when you try to centralize operations like picking up the phones and having a conversation about specific products with people they've never seen that product, never been in market, they may not have ever been in country, but moreover, you can't even get the hold of the same person to build a relationship with. it destroys trust, and it destroys your ability to operate in hospitality. That's great for software as a service. That's great for tech support when you're selling Dell computers. That's fine when you have Netflix and you can't figure out how to log on. You're not expecting relationships. But especially within vacation rentals, if you don't have a Tim Smith in market, you have nobody to go to hold accountable, not only individual as homeowners, but as a community. You know, when Tim Smith walks down the hallways, he's not only seeing his own homeowners, but he's also seeing his neighbors, and they're going to hold him accountable, and they're going to wag their finger in his face if they don't like something, and he's got to deal with that. That makes different decisions than if you're sitting in some 10-story building in 10 states away, making decisions without understanding how it's impacting your neighbors. And those neighbors are probably the second most valuable gatekeepers within your market to pick up new inventory. The first ones are probably the realtors, truthfully. The second gatekeepers are probably your neighbors. And if your neighbors are out bad-mouthing the snot out of you because you deserve it, you're not going to get the referrals you need to be able to build an inventory. They're also going to poison the homeowners you already have, right? Mm-hmm. Because they all talk. So local operations where you do have the economies of scale is one of the reasons why you watch a lot of the smaller property managers build profitable businesses, and it's small to medium, build profitable businesses that are successful, have a good reputation, and last for generations. Tim Cafferty is a multi-generation, property management owner. He's built not only what he inherited from and took on from his family, but he also has gone out and done it again on his own. Why? Because he's invested in the community. They know who he is. He cares about his community, and he understands how to do local operations. And he's still here, from when he was a young man as a sportscaster to now not as young man. What? No. But why is he successful and Vacasa wasn't when they certainly had more money than he did, as far as I know? Mm-hmm. Well, because local operations, and that's really the key driver of this fourth pillar, which I don't think you can actually do the last pillar without local oriented operations. Absolutely. Is empowered local hospitality professionals. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, what we heard over and over again was you hire people that have that hospitality gene, right? These are people that guests and owners could be yelling at them all day long and they still have a smile on their face. They're still trying to make for a successful experience. And so when you start to try to centralize operations and whatnot, these people stop thinking about what's best for the owner or the guest, and they start thinking, well, will corporate, approve this? And, then corporate comes back and says, well, that's not the way we do things at Aimbridge or at Vacasa, and they get very disempowered, they get very upset, and they end up leaving because they want to go to a place where they feel empowered. And so what we saw at places like Vacasa and like Aimbridge, where there was this massive brain drain of people leaving these organizations to go somewhere else where they can provide a great hospitality experience and feel empowered. So we found that this is obviously critical to a successful operations, is ensuring that your people feel empowered.
Yeah. So there's not just one way to do this, and I'm going to share my way I've done it, but I've also seen people taking this on from very different angles. And I think what's important is I'm sitting up here talking about, how Vacasa going to Casago is solving these problems. It's not the only way to solve these problems. We're going to find a few different models that are going to work to varying degrees in different environments with good leadership. We're going to find successes in this next generation of leadership that's going on. It's important to understand that there's not only one way to do this, but when it comes to local empowerment, I've seen, back to Tim Cafferty, he has a really interesting way of financially incentivizing his team through a egregious amount of financial transparency, in which everybody can see pretty much every single penny that's being spent, and then they're incentivized upon that. We see other different ways of sticks and carrots. The way that we've taken this on from the Casago point of view was early on within my journey, as I started when I was 28. At the time that this story happened, I was about 29, maybe 30. I came out of Ranger Battalion. I had taken over a small property management company. The first time that we ever had a situation where the fish caught the whale was in Puerto Penasco. I think it was up to about 60 units. A company that had 300 properties failed on the day that Saddam Hussein was captured, and the HOAs called me because I was the next guy. I was kind of the only guy next in line. They called us up and asked if we could help. Took over 3 front desks, and didn't even have enough employees to take on all front 3 desks. Within that, we started hiring like crazy, and wasn't able to really speak into the teammates about what was hospitality, what was our vision, what was the clarity of why we exist, why are we different, why was Rocky Point Management failing, why were we succeeding, and we started making some pretty terrible mistakes, and it was ugly. And I had one of our homeowners who had been a loyal fan of ours come into that office and let me have it good, and she was about 5 foot tall, but she felt like 7 foot tall by the time she walked out of there because she let me have it. And she walked out, and I turned around. I was like, "No, there's got to be a mistake. We would never do that." Turned around to the team, like, "What happened?" They're like, "Of course we did that." I'm like, why? They thought they were protecting the company through misguided, decision making, and without the integrity of having a cohesive organization in which I could communicate with everybody. We were going to fail the same way they did. So, I bought a 6-pack of beer and walked down to the beach, and was feeling pretty sorry for myself, wondering if I was over my ski tips, which I was, and I was wondering why could I lead a small team of Army Rangers in a foreign country with weapons and be successful, and I was failing at property management in Mexico, which didn't seem nearly as dangerous. I realized that the founders of every special operations unit that's in existence today had a creed they put together, a reason why they existed, a charter. And so that night I took out the Ranger Creed. We talked about it every single day at Ranger Battalion. We get up every morning, we repeat it. You were kicked out of Ranger Battalion if you didn't follow the creed. You were promoted for following it. It was a charter, and it was an interpretation of what we decided how to live our lives. And so I put together the first form of what we called the Orange Credo. It was basically what I called at the time was just a bunch of values. But what they actually were, as I understand it better now, is they were a bunch of principles that were there to honor, the values that I was trying to espouse with the organization. What I understand from that, going forward was, one, everybody thought it was incredibly stupid when I did it, and said it was, and we actually had people quit because of it, which is a good thing. But they were simple rules that help us make complex decisions outside the oversight of direct leadership, in which locally empowered hospitality professionals could make decisions on their own without having to go run up to the boss every single time, because the truth is they're never going to. You have everybody here who's an operator right now has probably 1,000 decisions being made every 30 seconds in their name. Whether they're going to clean something a little extra, or they're going to check the plates, the third plate down, to make sure it's not dirty because it's sitting in the cupboard, or whether they're going to talk to a homeowner with dignity and respect and compassion, or they're going to tell them it's not their problem, right? These are all happening in the minds of all of our teammates, and it's happening at every single minute of the day. So being able to build a culture and a North Star in which people can make decisions on their own, without the oversight of leadership, is how we went about trying to build an organization that would build a brand where the internal reality ended up becoming the external perception. When those people are making, I will say that when you find the right people, give them clarity, and explain to them what a good decision is, and then hold them accountable and talk about it every single day, which we do in our Orange meetings, over time, it doesn't happen, it's not a magic bullet, it doesn't happen right away, you can't just write it and put it up on a wall. If you keep having those discussions, over time you build a tribe of people who are true believers. The people who don't align will self-select out, and you'll end up building people who can make decisions that are empowered within the organization. It takes time and it's imperfect. You're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you need the North Star more than they do, because you've got decisions in which you're also a human and you're going to make mistakes on. But that's how you, when you build that sort of trust with your team, that's within this environment, that's how you do it. That's how we've done it. If you don't have the ability to put your local teams in power of the decisions within this scope of business, you will fail. And how you go about that is certainly up to you, but that's how we've done it.
I worked at the Home Depot, and we had a very similar, we had a Home Depot cheer we would do every morning, and we had the values that were the orange values at the Home Depot, and that's a $250 billion organization, and that's how they got all of their employees.
They have orange values?
They've got orange values too. I know.
I have to call those guys.
Exactly, right? But that's how they got everyone aligned, and they had a similar culture and similar values, and people knew how to make good decisions with these values. So I love it. Quickly before we end, we just wanted to talk about some of the findings we found around economies of scale. We found that in hospitality, there's actually diseconomies of scale, not economies of scale. When we did our study, we looked at two different companies. We looked at a company called Ball Corp, which is the largest producer of aluminum cans in the world. So one manufacturing line can produce up to 1 billion cans. And then we contrasted that with a couple of different hospitality companies. But if we look at economies of scale, you would expect to see economies of scale when it comes to labor. And so an example is Ball Corp, right? So they produce up to 1 billion cans in that one manufacturing line, and that one manufacturing line only needs about 18 people to run it. So whether you produce 100,000 cans a year or 1 billion, there's 18 people. So as you produce more, your unit economics get better, right? Your unit costs go down. We contrasted that with a study on the Forney Independent School, which is one of the fastest growing school districts outside of Dallas. In 2013, there were just under 9,000 students enrolled, and in 2025, there's now about 19,000 students. So it's grown significantly. But we found that as the student population grew, the staff population grew at a faster rate. Because as you want to keep your student to teacher ratios, right, of like 1 to 20, well now as you hire more teachers, you need more managers, and you need to invest in more programs like special ed or arts or whatnot, and so you just require more people as your school builds. And we see similar parallels in the hospitality industry as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing?
I think a good example of this in parallel, if you think of Netflix, where every time somebody signs up for an account, they don't have to go hire somebody new to do this, as opposed to the U.S. government, who has to hire 5 people every time there's something new that comes about, right? So it happens the same within our industry. When you think about software as a service, when you think about manufacturing, the scales economy fit right in line with that. Now, there's our economies of scale when it comes to the number of units you have within your portfolio, and making sure that you understand the difference between where are those scales of economy as opposed to the diseconomies of scale. When you look at large organizations, you start to see that labor costs per unit start to go up dramatically, and you start to have middle management, because as you start to grow multiple cities, it doesn't become twice as hard to go to a second city. I would say it's quadratically more difficult. It's actually a multiplier, and as I was thinking about this, I was digging around on the internet, and it hit me that somebody had said there that growing is addition, scaling is multiplication, right? And if you really think about that, that's an interesting way of rethinking about scale. If I just keep adding units, but I'm continuing to add more labor, continuing to add more layers of layer and management, because I have to now have a larger HR department. I have to have extra HR helpers. I have to have extra middle management to be able to manage divisions and regions. Your cost of labor per unit goes up as you build that out, as opposed to scale, where if you can continue to grow your portfolio and your revenue off that portfolio in a way that creates a multiplier, where you can only, where when you hit a certain number, you're not continually to have to grow that out, to grow out your labor costs, is the only way you're ever going to be able to multiply this. And in service, you're always going to have that issue. So the question is making sure you break out where the economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. And if you get those conflated, you're going to fail as an organization, because you're going to start to have the struggles of both in hospitality and service, but also within your profit and loss statements. And our CFO is here, Anand Nampali, which I always get his name wrong, but I have a struggle with it. But one of the most brilliant financial minds I've ever got to meet. But he talks a lot about the diseconomies of labor, and making sure that we keep a lean organization that's running, in which we can, as we go through a transition of going from a very large organization to a very asset-light organization, ensuring that financial discipline and transitional costs are held in place, so that we have a sustainable and responsible financial future for all stakeholders. And I think that's important, because when you watch what has happened at Vacasa, they couldn't just keep raising more money, which I guess they could, they did. But they started stacking on a lot of fees because they had to survive. And why did they need those fees? Because they had a massive infrastructure that they couldn't support, right? And so going to asset light, making sure that you're building a team that multiplies, that doesn't create just addition, is really going to be the key to success of a scaled organization.
Yeah, and we saw that with bulk purchasing. With Ball Corp, they can get a lot of cost savings, right? 55% of their costs come in the materials. So if they're able to negotiate better costs, it can have a really good impact on their bottom line. Whereas in hospitality, over 50% of your cost is in labor. And as you get bigger, people expect to be paid more, they expect better benefits, and so you just see the costs rise there.
Yeah.
So.
You imagine if Ball Corp had to hire an extra person per 10,000 units that
Yep.
they produce, it would bankrupt them.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So really interesting findings here. Any questions from I know we're a little over, but any questions from the audience?
This all just makes me think about the opportunity for economy homes in the industry, because we're all focused on having the profitable homes, but there are always going to be a huge number of owners out there that either don't want to self-manage, but they're not trying to maximize their profit for their home either. And there's also going to be a ton of guests out there that are not wealthy, that are looking for economy places to stay. What happens to those homes? Is there an opportunity for somebody to focus just on economy and possibly build out a model that only services economy homes? And is Vacasa thinking maybe something like that in the future, of being able to separate economy homes from high-end homes, brand-wise?
Yeah, I don't. It's a good question. I don't think you have to be a luxury brand to be profitable. I think you have to provide great value for what you're offering. And the truth is, luxury today isn't necessarily about being opulent. It's about being seen. It's about when expectations are less than perception. And so there is a floor in which the cost to rent matters. You can't go to an economic model in which, just because there's a demand for it, that is below your operational cost to provide that service. But when you do have an opportunity there, I think we will see franchise partners who will be in specific markets that are very blue-collar markets. In fact, to be honest with you, Casa Go got started in Mexico, and Rocky Point is a drive-to destination, which is really a blue-collar destination. It's much less expensive than San Diego. That's why people go there, right? Now I have homes. I have beachfront studios there that rent for $100 a night still. There's not a lot of profit in that, but we're able to scale that over time. So that's my model there. But then if you look at our Santa Barbara office, our average reservation is $54,000, $57,000. So being able to, have that diversity of who are you and what do you represent under the flag is going to be important.
Yeah, only 3% of hotels are actually luxury hotels. So the consumer really does demand most of the demands in mid-scale and upscale hotels. And the most unprofitable hotels are actually the luxury hotels because it requires a lot of labor. So the most profitable are in that. I think, where we have an opportunity as an industry is to create that quality framework that's missing, that exists in every other hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, and so that we have very clear, we're clearly communicating what we're delivering to the guest, and the guest knows what they're paying for at the end of the day. Some guests want that economy experience. You don't always want to be in a luxury hotel stay.
I think whichever segment you're in, be in the top portion of that segment, right? Like if you're going to be in economy, be the very best economy. Make your people, it doesn't cost anything to let people be seen and heard. Be the very best. Make it novel and interesting for people to go because they'll probably appreciate it a lot more because they don't often get that.
Amber.
Shameless plug. Tomorrow afternoon, the last day in here, we'll be talking to Nir Myman, Rachel and Rob all day, and Robin Tragan about what constitutes luxury and STR.
Amazing.
And a lot of our pre-conversations sound like what you're talking about, Steve. So
Yeah.
we'll be backing you up.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Take care. Thank you.